Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Director-Watch, an AwardsWatch podcast that attempts to get inside the mind of cinema's greatest auteurs, explore what drives them, and maybe we go on a few unrelated tangents along the way. I'm Ryan McQuade, the executive editor here at AwardsWatch, and joining me, as always, is my co-host through the cosmos, Jay Ledbetter.
Ryan, it's the beginning of the episode, so I'm going to plant the seeds of the tree of life, and we're going to talk about it. So
that's it?
It's going to be a very unserious, like loose, jokey episode.
We got a lot of bits.
I definitely don't consider this to be something that if I screw up, I will hate myself for the rest of my life.
There's no
definitely
going back
not
now.
What's going on.
Well, you're starting off strong.
Yeah.
You're putting these unrealistic expectations on yourself early on.
Not screwing it up is an unrealistic expectation for this podcast.
Exactly.
That's a good point.
But also, I do want to say, I think that this is the big one, not just for you, but I do think in the series in general. I think
haven't gotten to song yet.
Well, To the Wonder is next week. So, and that is the huge one. That's the one everyone talks about. Well, we're in the middle, right? Stab in the middle of this series. And it's the big one, I think. And it's a very important film, not just for you, but I think for myself and for our guests and for everyone that sees this movie. It's a big movie in Malick's filmography. And yes, we are talking about The Tree of Life. And, well, Jay, the movie it's a big movie, and it's a movie about time.
Talks about some stuff
and age. So it's only right that we bring the wisest of us all on to the Tree of Life episode. And that is our editor-in-chief, our guest today, Mr. Erik Anderson. Welcome back to Director Watch, Erik.
Well, where Jay is going to plant the seeds, I plan to reap and sow, and that is why I'm here.
Wow.
He's got his little gardening tools.
Deep,
you see the little
already.
Belt?
I definitely have a hoe or two. Yes.
Or you are one. Either one.
But yes, all right, serious stuff. Serious podcast.
It is a serious podcast.
Movie.
A serious podcast directed by the Coen brothers one day.
Yeah, you didn't need to lay it on quite so thick there, Ryan. That's putting a lot on all of us to really live up to.
Well, when you step into
that this movie is.
Well, yeah, but when you step into a Terrence Malick movie series and you're going to talk about The Tree of Life, this is a big one, and it comes with big expectations. And we're already 5 to 10 minutes in, and the audience is going,
lower.
What
I want to lower,
the fuck is the show?
Those expectations.
Yeah, but you shouldn't.
We're aiming for like a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, and if we get a 8 or 9, then we've done our job. Erik, before we get into this movie, because we're really going to spend a lot of time today talking about this movie, big time. I got to ask your opinions on Terrence Malick as a director. What you like about him, maybe what you don't like about him. And yeah, we'll just start there, Erik. Those are just leveling the expectations of what the audience can expect from your thoughts on The Tree of Life. So before we get to those, let's just talk about Malick for you.
I think I'm trying to think of where or when I would have been introduced to Malick, because obviously it wasn't.
You guys went to school?
Yeah, that's it. I have to imagine it would have been video store days, and it would have started with Days of Heaven, I think.
Okay.
I think that's where. And I don't know, we were pretty obsessed back then too with theatrical cuts and director cuts, and that has been kind of one of his markers in his career, is that there's always both. He's constantly fighting for a director's cut. And I don't know, that sort of became part of his aura. But the thing I have always loved about him, when I do like his films, because I don't like everything. There's a lot I don't like. Is the patience that it requires as a viewer, because it's so often very rewarding. I don't know. I find him fascinating for making some movies and then dipping for a generation and then kind of coming back rather ferociously. And then it's like, yeah, I'm gonna make 3 movies a year. Sure, why not? It's so nonsensical. His career is completely nonsensical. But I'm very big on aesthetic being able to carry a movie a really long ways. And I don't think there's anybody that does that quite the way he does, or as well as he does. Again, when it's good.
When is it not good?
I would not need to desert island probably the majority of his
like the back half of his
films
this
after
series.
Floaty Malick.
Yeah, where he's late Malick.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
No, nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect. Okay, so that's Erik's take on Malick. Seemed to be pretty standard. This is again. This is someone's favorite. I feel like this. I'm like doing a birthday announcement. This is someone's favorite movie of the year of all time. No, this is a big episode. And Jay, I know that we talked a lot about in the last episode that 20-year gap, the making of Thin, or I guess a couple episodes ago about the 20-year gap of the Thin Red Line. We talked a lot about in the last episode with the New World, that being a precursor to this film, sort of like him getting all the kinks out to then build up and make this. I know that you've been doing all your reading, Jay.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about all the books that you read and the process of making the Tree of Life.
Oh yeah, I mean we'll get into it plenty over the course of the ep, but it was actually pretty shortly after the New World that this was greenlit. This was greenlit in 2005. Terrence Malick has a tendency, or at least he did before he made this movie, to kind of drag that out a little bit. Obviously, this movie came out several years after that. And as he was kind of warming up to do this film, he got together with his old buddy, Jack Fisk, and Malick would be like, hey, I'll fly you down to Texas. Come on, let's do some location scouting for the Tree of Life. And Fisk said that they would just literally just walk around small towns, and Malick would be like, oh, that's a very pretty tree. Oh, that house is very nice. I think that might be a good one for our movie. And they did that like 4 times. They would go through fields of sunflowers and all sorts of stuff. It's the most Malick-y thing imaginable. But they go through that. It goes through the development process. This is actually a script that he started writing in the 70s, similar to The New World. And it was a film that nobody who had made it had ever really experienced before. For the children, for example, they auditioned apparently, or looked at anyway. They screened 10,000 Texas boys for the roles of the O'Brien brothers, which they weren't messing around.
That sounds terrifying of a process. Yeah. 10,000 Texas boys. God, that sounds like Boys State.
And then they found America's favorite movie star, Ty Sheridan, which was huge. He was an X-Man.
Jay, side thought.
Cyclops.
What do you think of the Tinderbar?
The Tinderbar.
Yeah.
Ty Sheridan. I remember nothing about that.
He was the well, he wasn't the titular Tinderbar, but he was the lead role in that because his uncle was Ben Affleck, and he was the owner of the bar that was Tinder.
Yeah, I did.
Which if you flip it around, it means bartender. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah.
The Tinder bar.
So anyway, Malick gets with his buddy Emmanuel Lubezki. Lubezki's like, let's do it. I can't wait for this. And
wait, he said it just like that?
He said it just like that, in
cool.
that accent.
All right.
And the cast of this movie is so interesting because we obviously think of Jessica Chastain as such a movie star now, but when this movie was filming, she was, I don't want to say a nobody, but she was a theater person. She had never really done a movie like this. And Lubezki went into pretty great detail in some of the stuff that I read about how the actors sort of adapted to this style. And Chastain didn't really know what she didn't know quite yet, so she was totally good. Brad Pitt apparently had a really tough time, and he was also a late addition to the cast. And he had a hard time adapting to just walking outside and being filmed and not sitting in his trailer for hours at a time, where Lubezki seriously is like, we just kind of started filming at 8:30 and we kept filming until 8:30, and we just had a million miles of film, and somehow Terry Malick found it in an edit. And Erik actually brought up that Malick likes to have his director's cuts, and this is an interesting example of that. Not only because the extended version of this, which is included in the Criterion, he doesn't consider a director's cut. It's just an extended cut. And I don't know if y'all have seen the extended cut, but it really is just more the Tree of Life. It's a really interesting cut. I prefer the theatrical, but we can maybe talk about that a little bit later. But the most interesting thing on that front was that Malick really wanted to use digital technology that didn't really exist to make a quote unquote cut, like an option where you could hit play and it would randomly generate the scenes in an order that was just randomized. So every time you did it, he wanted it to be like the Grateful Dead of movies. He just wanted it to be, you never watch the same movie twice, which I think is fascinating, speaks to obviously his interest, and just would have just been a crazy thing to experience. But
so he wanted to make like Clue, like
I mean,
every
Clue,
ending's
except
different.
A little choose your own adventure.
Yeah, choose your
except
own depression.
You don't choose your own. Yeah, choose your own divinity is kind of the cut that he wanted.
It's actually, it sounds like a really interesting way of doing it. I don't know how
see, that's where audience patience kind of comes in, because there are so many people that would just be,
what
this
patience?
is pretentious bullshit.
Yeah.
And thinking, why does this movie have 5 editors if it doesn't have if you can throw scenes anywhere in it and essentially still tell the same story?
Yeah, well, it feels more of like something for a digital format, for an at-home experience rather than a theatrical experience. And maybe like, like that just feels like a it's essentially a randomizer is what he wants to do with the material that he has, which
he wants to put the movie on shuffle.
Yeah, which is interesting. I give him that. I mean, but again, not all ideas in your head probably should exist. So that's a good thing that someone said, Terry, that's not an option, even if it might have been one.
Yeah, it would be interesting. Again, I like having the extended cut, but I prefer the theatrical cut.
Yeah,
but
I've never seen I've never seen the extended cut.
It adds a whole ass hour.
Yeah, which I mean, I don't need, because spoiler alert, I think what we have here is perfect enough.
Yes.
There's some stuff I like a lot, but it messes with the pacing of the movie.
And I think the theatrical version is perfectly paced.
I still recommend the extended cut. What I said in my
I know people
Letterboxd blurb was, I said it is one of my favorite movies instead of my favorite movie of all time. That's fair. So
yeah, I mean, like people lost their minds trying to get that cut too, because like when I remember it was a big deal when Criterion put the extended cuts and then the New World director's cut on those, and that they were able to house those. But yeah, I'd never been able to watch them, even for preparation for the show. Erik, you've seen them both though, right?
Yeah, and I much prefer the theatrical cut, because I mean, the theatrical version already introduces ideas and deaths and scenes that never really kind of come back. They just exist. And in this specific case, I absolutely love that. There's such a, like, the death of the brother feels so distant, but it's it doesn't need any more than that, because all you're focused on is Jessica Chastain and her grief of it. And then even Sean Penn later. It's I don't need more. I don't actually need more peripheral characters than just the boys and the parents, really. It just it does everything that I needed it to.
And I really appreciate the fact that there are other cuts of his films, but Terrence Malick movies are kind of so primal and the experiences are so singular that it's hard for me to say that I like anything more than the first cut I watched of a Terrence Malick movie, where it is so experiential that I form a relationship with that film in ways that I don't with other movies. That makes it hard to enjoy a different cut more than the first one that I saw. But it just seems like really everyone was so freaking committed to making this movie and committed to making this vision as singular and important as, in my opinion, it ends up being. The only person I think who was involved who didn't like it is Sean Penn. Of course, because he probably wanted to be on screen more, but his quote was, "I didn't find at all on the screen the emotion of the script, which is the most magnificent one I've ever read," which I interpret as, I didn't find myself on the screen quite as much as I wanted, which in the role was one of the most magnificent I've ever read. But
I mean, if you're going to be in a Terrence Malick movie, sometimes you're going to get Adrian Brody. You got to know that.
Look, sometimes you're Jim Caviezel and sometimes you're Adrian Brody.
I mean, he would know. He was in Thin Red Line. He knows how Malick operates. He's not new to this. And also, I mean, like, this is, I mean, when has Sean Penn not had enough of Sean Penn? You know what I mean?
I will say this about the extended cut. The one thing that I found really interesting about it is at the very end of the extended cut, we get a view of Penn's super like modernist house, Jack's modernist house, and we see a sun that we don't see in the original cut, which I think adds kind of a layer that the theatrical cut doesn't really have. But and there are some things I think are additive in that cut, but I think the pacing specifically, and again, just that experience of watching the original cut is just really interesting. And we should mention that this is kind of the beginning of his biographical phase of his career, where he did lose a brother in such a tragic way. It wasn't in war, but his brother was sort of a piano prodigy, and he went over to, I believe, Spain to study under, a master, and he just got really depressed and full of self-doubt to one degree or another, and ended up breaking his own hands on purpose so that he couldn't play piano, and then eventually died. The assumption is by suicide, and that through line is so built into this movie. It's such a fascinating production because there's so many rules that Malick had for shooting the movie, but it's also such a naturalistic movie that is all about catching things that you can't write in the way that many of Malick's films have been, but he takes it to the most extreme in this film and kind of continues that over his next few films. But this has a certain philosophical focus that perhaps those other films that will come after it don't necessarily have. But we can dive into analysis of the film itself, but it's a really remarkable production. Emmanuel Lubezki has some incredible things to say about the making of this movie that I might get into a little bit later, but it's a remarkable piece of art that means a lot to me. I'll just start there and hand it off to y'all.
Yeah. Well, might as well get our thoughts on this film while we're at it. So, Eric, what do you think of the Tree of Life? How did you first see this, Erik? Was this in a theater back in 2011? And what's been your relationship since with it, and how was it for you on the rewatch?
Yes, I saw this in 2011 in San Francisco at the Embarcadero Theater, which is now closed. Unfortunately, it was one of the better art house theaters in San Francisco that was in downtown. And I saw it with my husband and a friend of ours. And I had a shockingly visceral reaction to it because I didn't, know too much going in, and I didn't really need to. I was just like, it's Terrence Malick, so let's go. And, it's much like how much I appreciate that Malick took biographical elements of his life to make something totally different. It's bits and pieces so that he could work through things and tell it in a story that was different, really, than his own. I came out of it watching this story of three brothers, and being the oldest of three brothers. And I was just, I was sobbing. I was outside and couldn't walk to the car and had to just work through what my relationship was with my brothers at the time, which was not great. It was pretty estranged. And it's the kind of thing that it is not very much my life or upbringing, but bits and pieces that make you really do an enormous amount of self-evaluation. And not everything does that. Not everything has to, but sometimes it does. And it caught me off guard. And then as time goes by, you sort of wonder, do I like or dislike something because I had such a visceral reaction to it? And I definitely love it for its own piece and completely unrelated to me. Unlike what Ryan will make you believe, I was not around at the beginning of the creation of the universe. So, like
False.
that whole absolutely, absolutely true. I was not there. That entire sequence is just one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. It's so audacious to just sort of drop you into a Discovery Channel, our universe documentary for like 15 minutes. And it's, I don't know. It had such a on repeat viewings. I don't want to say a calming effect, but absolutely, I don't know, poetic. And I think I've actually grown to love the movie more as I distanced my personal reaction to it at the time. And that's only made it better for me.
Jay?
Yeah.
Floor is yours, my friend, to tell us about, I guess, the big question. Why is this, Jay, your favorite movie of all time?
I think Erik captured certainly some of it there. When I think about this film, it is so remarkable how it's incredibly specific, but it's also universal exactly at the same time. How it is a film very much about one family, but everyone, I think, who watches this film can see themselves in what is on screen, to the point that for me personally, I now am like, oh, I look kind of like Jack, like young Jack. I looked exactly like that. And I don't know if I did or not, but I've sort of transposed his journey onto my own as a child. And if I could boil down the Tree of Life into kind of one sentence, which you can't really do, and I'll boil it down into 6,000 sentences later, but the Tree of Life is about how insignificant the reality in which we exist is, but also how cosmically important our existence feels to us in the moment, how transcendentally important tragedy and grief can feel to an individual person. And that is exemplified by that incredible creation sequence, which I think is truly one of the greatest things ever put on film. I think the film at large challenges the form to a degree that is remarkable, certainly by today's standards. I mean, this was in the middle of that superhero renaissance, and it had been developed before that, but it released in the midst of that era. And I'm sure there were plenty of people who saw, oh, it's a Brad Pitt movie, and then they went into it and they were like, I don't like thinking about this stuff. This is too challenging for me. And that challenge is, I think, the great brilliance of this film. And you go far beyond just the emotional experience that this movie provides, which is an incredible one, but it's also so incredibly philosophical. If you want to look back at Terrence Malick's films, they are almost exclusively, or not exclusively in and of themselves, but certainly every film is partly about a person's journey to find where they belong, to find a place. And this takes that to the most extreme, where it is about what is the purpose of the universe and trying to find some sort of divinity in the face of what appears to be an act of God that works against your well-being, which in this case is the death of a son. And I did not see this movie in theaters, thank God, because I would have been 20 and I would have been like, all right, did that. It's drink specials night. Let's go check that out. That's more important. I watched this probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I was sort of having this, I was sort of reflecting on my movie history, and I would say I did not grow up in a household where movies were central to our home life. I grew up in a religious household, not a constrictive religious household, but certainly a religious household. And I wasn't even allowed to see PG-13 movies basically until I was 13. And that certainly stunted to a degree my film education. And then in high school, I got a laptop and started torrenting thousands of movies and watched those. U.S. government, don't come at me. Don't do it anymore. But that was kind of where it began. And from there, in the later years of my college life, I started writing about movies and exploring movies in ways that I had never done before. And I really, truly am appreciative of the fact that I didn't see this until I was like 27, 28 years old. Because it means, I believe, something entirely differently then than it would have meant if I'd seen it when I was 20. And even now, it means something entirely differently than it did when I was 27 or 28, because now I am a father, and that provides some perspective on what you see in this film that I didn't have before. Not that anyone may not be able to experience that not being a father, but for me specifically, to Erik's point about this movie kind of feeling differently every time you watch it, which is how I feel about it, and I've seen it, a dozen times now. It is a film that every time I watch it, it makes me feel something different, but it makes me feel entirely in ways that almost nothing else does. It allows me to unburden myself of the shield of everyday life and just view the world with a sense of providence in ways that I'm almost completely unfamiliar with, because even now I consider myself a very spiritual person, if not specifically devout to any organized religion in some ways, but I, again, grew up in a religious household. I'm very familiar with the story of Job, which is one of the great inspirations of this film, this idea of being faced with some sort of wrath and still trying to accept a form of divinity and a sense of purpose, and trying to maintain a degree of hope. But when you kind of reflect on it, what is life without that tragedy? If you are not confronted by that tragedy, how can you truly discover any sense of purpose? If you are not shown great conflict in life, how can you accept the end of it or even believe in some sort of transcendence beyond it? And that's kind of those are the thoughts I have watching this film, among many others. There's also a mention of a Mr. Ledbetter, which is very important, not a common name that you hear in film, but they do it in this one. And I'm just going to stop talking because I feel like I've been going on for a while, but I've got plenty more to say about it. But truly, this for me is like, it's like a Da Vinci. It is like a Van Gogh. It is like an E.E. Cummings poem. It is a film that transcends the medium, challenges the idea of what a movie can be, and captures a profundity unlike any other film I've seen for myself personally. So, yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to follow that. See, I had to do this every episode during the series. It's never getting any easier, folks. I did see this in theaters. I was in college. And I was one of those that I heard the reception at a Cannes. I knew Terrence Malick's work. Hadn't seen all of it, but I knew of his work. And it was playing in my local art house theater that no longer exists, just like you, Eric. So, fucking bullshit that we don't have a lot of art house theaters anymore, especially post-pandemic. And I remember being one of the survivors because a lot of people walked out in my theater because it had happened within the first 30 minutes of the film, which I put this out on my cards out on the table with this. I pretty much fell asleep for a half second because the movie puts you in such a good, in a dark theater, puts you in such a place of with that score and the way we're, the shots of the universe and everything. It put me right in a place of like, oh, time to go to sleep. And I never had that happen to me before. But the minute the movie gets to the core of the story, I was awake the entire time. So I didn't really miss much. And I did see the dinosaurs. So that was one thing. But I just remember watching it, and I remember kind of just feeling numb to the bone and being like, okay, I don't know what the hell I just watched, but it was an experience, and I'm very appreciative of it. And it took me a long, long time to get back to it because, one, for this series, kind of had to rip off that Band-Aid. But two, it also felt that, there were so many people that said that, like, this is the movie, like Jay, that this is the movie of our lifetime. This is the movie of the last decade. And I kept kind of like, okay, I have the Criterion. I'm going to watch it, put it on a list and, or see if it's in my top of the decade. And I never got around to rewatching it. So the series was the first time I had actually rewatched it in a very long time since that first go round. And I wept multiple times throughout this because I think what Jay said is absolutely true. It means more, weirdly enough, now than it did for some 20-year-old that's probably at the time is feeling bulletproof and not as, I think, reflective as I was then as I am now on my life and the people that I've lost and the relationships I have. And I think that is okay within movies to, as you get older, certain movies get better for you and they mean things differently. and it may not have been the right time for you to experience that, but to watch it for this experience was the perfect time. I know everyone always tries to make fun of the dinosaur sequence when they try to write off this film. This felt entirely different for me. I wept during this sequence because I was thinking about, and maybe, and obviously you guys might have different interpretations of it, but I just thought about that being such a beautiful, forgiving moment in what we normally would think would be a scene of violence. And there's grace to it and elegance. And it was making me kind of feel hopeful about our current world and even in 2011, thinking back. But then I was thinking, obviously, this movie starts with the death of a child. And Eric, you talked about like going through Mrs. O'Brien's sort of grief process at the beginning of this film and the ways in which generationally you handle that, right? Because when they're right around or a little bit older than Jack, played by Sean Penn, when he starts reminiscing about when he lost his brother and when it truly starts to feel like it affects him, and the reactionary between the two that we then see throughout the rest of how they parent and how they raise these boys are also the same differences that you find within their grieving process. And it feels, like you said, Eric, sort of like a interesting way to start off this film. And I think the grandmother kind of saying, at least you have the other two. And I found that, and I was just sitting there going like, holy shit, what a true yet horrific and terrifying notion.
The Lord take it away, my man.
And yet that event not only changed them, it changed the other two we see through Jack throughout his reminiscing process throughout this film, but also then seeing their upbringing. And this film was not just shot in Waco, it was shot throughout Texas. The courthouse sequence, I've been to that courthouse and I've been to some of these places, and I've driven through family vacations or family trips and through the ins and outs and small parts of Texas. So I've seen these landmarks, I've seen these locations, I've seen people that look just like this family. And then I started reflecting on the fact that this is the ultimate, I think, movie right up there with something like The Godfather about fathers and sons. And I was thinking a lot about how this movie is about, at least for me, the inevitability of you being like your father, even though you don't want to be. There's a way in which they don't know how to speak to one another, don't know how to live around one another. It's regret. It's there's just a lot that's said within, but not said within these two people. And I thought a lot about my grandfather and my father, who had a really rocky relationship. He was the youngest. My grandfather they were so alike that they couldn't see eye to eye throughout his entire life. And even my grandfather tried to stop my dad from going to college because he just didn't want him to go. And it took so much convincing, and it spent years not talking to one another. And it took accidents, and it took anger and arguments and everything to finally get to a place when he was older enough where they were finally on the same page. And it took years and it took decades. And I was thinking about them. And then I was thinking about how that then implies how they both saw myself and how they saw the rest of my family, and how their relationship needed to change and blossom in order for a family to move on and survive. I thought a lot about that on my mom's side, when the beginning of this film, when we do see that, when we hear about RL passing, I thought about how my cousins, two of my cousins passing on my mother's side, were seismic shifts within our family and our relationship dynamics. And then, as Jay said, I thought about how much that affects me, but how much does that really affect everything else in the world? How that is the biggest moment and yet the smallest
Forget
moment
the
in a
world,
universe.
the universe.
Yeah, the universe.
It
And
transcends.
you just think about, we're all made up of tiny little moments on a whole that are happy or sorrowful. And how do those affect everything? And I just, by the end of this movie, went, I'm an idiot for not loving this thing. Because this movie is, I wanted to watch it again immediately after it was over. And I've been thinking about it the last 4 days. I told Jay I was real tempted to watch it again, which is not something I usually really do, because
I've watched it twice in the last 2 days.
he did. He watched it
including
twice.
The extended cut.
Yeah. And I was just like, I think that this movie is beautiful and perfect in so many ways. And yeah, it's his best. I'm putting that out there.
Wow.
And I wasn't there at the beginning of all this, but yeah.
I want to come back to the dinosaur.
Yeah, I do too, because it makes me
Land Before Time.
Very, very, very much. Mainly because it represents the entire theme of the film better than anything else in the film does, which lays itself out quite literally at the beginning. And that is the way of nature or the way of grace. And I think it can be, for some people, that is where it's like the pretension can kind of come in, because it is such a simple theme, but it's extremely powerful.
God, it's not just that. I mean, my God.
And I think about the one dinosaur putting its foot on the other's head and then making a decision to lift it off in a moment that is, it's an evolution. And it is a fascinating element, because you're sort of struggling also with creationism versus evolution, just as a viewer, and that's what you're watching too. But I was so surprised that sequence was so representative, because I do remember when the bits and pieces of the film were released before, and the dinosaur element was in there, people were like freaking out. Like, the cinephiles of 2010 were like, what in the world is this movie going to be about? What is even
And people
happening?
laughed at it. Like, straight up laughed at it. Yeah.
Absolutely, they did. But yeah, I think about Jessica Chastain's monologue of the theme, the way of nature and the way of grace, and you choose which one to follow. Grace doesn't try to please itself. Nature only wants to please itself. And it's then very literal with her and Brad Pitt. It's very literal with the choices that the boys are making. That it for as much of an ethereal and meandering type of storytelling, it's really not. It's right there up front. I think sometimes we choose to not want to see things reflected quite so literally or quite so accurately.
Well, I think that the people just think with his films too, there comes a certain sense of abstractness. And I actually think this is a lot like almost back to Badlands in sense of that it's telling you everything. It's not hiding what it is. And that's why
But
I
also,
don't
if
think
you
it's,
don't like this movie, you say it's about nothing.
yeah, and you just
In my
move on
opinion,
with your
it is
life.
about
Yeah.
literally everything.
It's literally everything.
Yeah. Which I mean, some of the most simplest things in storytelling or in presenting a film is told through such a simple process, then it branches out its complexity and what it means to you personally, I think, as a viewer. So yeah, if you're going in with a sort of cynical mindset, or if you're laughing at certain aspects, which was a thing that people were doing in theaters, they were laughing at, like, what the hell are these fucking dinosaurs doing here? You know what I mean? It's like, well, then you're not really taking, you never were on this kind of thing to begin with. And I mean, that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, again, like that could change for you years down the road. Or you could just be a, person that doesn't see anything in this, which I don't know how you watch this movie and don't see, like you said, like Jay said, a little bit of something inside of you, a little bit of, because I go back to what you're saying about the dinosaur sequence. It's not really just about the initial foot being put on the other dinosaur's face, which that's clearly a predator versus more or less, a non-threatening other dinosaur species. It's the lift of it, the lift of the claw, and then
I mean, that scene is the
put
birth of
back
grace.
down.
That's what it is. It's honestly
Yeah.
not that complicated to
Yeah.
Eric's
It's
point.
not. That's the thing.
No, but I to the point there, for me, the thing that got me the most was that it's not even that. I mean, our worst instinct, or at least my worst instinct, is to believe that is going to be a threat of danger. It's not that we need to see anything dangerous, that anything dangerous needs to happen there. It's the fact that that little hesitation of lift and putting back down, and then the release, is that I can do this whenever I want. And it's a sense of what is in control and what isn't in control, nature versus nurture. Yes. And so I sat there and I was just like, okay, cool. This is beautiful and beautifully shot. It's also terrifying. It's also beautiful emotionally in terms of symbolism. And then we get into the story about this family, and then how that scene and everything else sort of juxtaposes itself. I also think too, the is it the water sequences that happens shortly after, breathtaking stuff, just like absolutely knocked me off my socks. I had my volume turned up and everything in my house. I was like, this movie from an aesthetic standpoint, it's a marvel within itself. And Lubezki is he is doing things with this camera that's insane. I think it's one of the best looking films I've ever seen in my life, easily. And and this on a Blu-ray, not even on, like, what imagine a 4K of this would look like. I think that, or remember back to maybe seeing this in theaters. I don't remember it being nearly as, I remember it taking over visually, and it meant a lot, and I processed it differently than I do now, which I was on a television, but it felt so cinematic this go around, more than weirdly it did 10 years ago, or almost 15 years ago now, on a big screen. So
No, I mean, I'll kind of give my thoughts on the dinosaur sequence briefly, and at least for me anyway, impossible to think about this movie without oversharing. But I remember 3 or 4 times ago, and again, this movie means something different to me every time I watch it. But 3 or 4 times ago, I think my son was probably just several months old, and I I I just remember seeing that dinosaur underneath the claw of the, I'll call it a velociraptor, whatever it is, the predator. And I just remember thinking, he's literally making motions that my son makes in his crib. And it's it's not that that was the intent, I think, by any stretch, but this is a film that gives an impression of something that everyone has experienced, in my opinion. It is poetic in that way. It is a film that, in the same way that I spoke about the ending of The New World, it is a film that is operating at a level of impressionism and expressionism that is almost unmatched. And there are parts of this film that feel so unique, which make the expressionistic sequences, like when you see Jessica Chastain in the glass coffin, or when she starts floating like a ballerina in the sky, that it only exaggerates those moments and takes them to an entirely different level. But you see that birth of grace, and like I said, it's not a terribly complicated idea, but it is shown with such a degree of integrity and honesty. And I think the willingness to go there with such sincerity is what makes that so special. And you talk about Lubezki, Ryan. I think this is, one of the best shot films ever. And I think about so many shots in this movie all the time. We could just spend 30 minutes talking about the shots
I mean,
that I
shit, the
that I love.
poster is like you just send like the original poster
The
with all the
baby
different
foot.
no, not the baby foot, but like
Oh,
there's
the
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 collage.
the
You know what I
collage.
mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, just send that to the Academy, and that's how he gets an
yeah.
Oscar. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean,
Because like it's take 5 or 6 or 10 of those shots, and it's probably the best shot and it's I mean, it's probably not even some of the best
but
shots
I
in it, but
don't,
still it's a
but I
snapshot
don't
of it. Yeah.
find this movie to be painterly in the way that Days of Heaven is painterly. This is a movie that is about capturing moments and capturing brief ideas. This is a movie that is largely told almost in montage, where it's just these snippets of human experience that are shot through a lens that most people wouldn't think to shoot them. I think specifically of the sequence where they're shooting the shadows like they are the upright figures, where it's almost an upside down shot, but it's like in this moment, the shadows are the real essence of these people. And it's like that reflection, that the impact of the sun, the impact of the heavens on these people is giving these people that this true idea of self, and is transcending the earthly plane. And that's really hard to communicate with just a shot, especially a shot that's just like, oh, a lot of people would just say, oh, it's shadow, that's whatever, that was kind of pretentious. But it's, maybe it is, but I don't care.
No, I think it might be my favorite shot in the entire film for that reason, because it is just another example of the duality that is in every bit of this.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's just flipping the frame upside down. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And then it turns into something beautiful and sinister at the same time. It's almost unexplainably gorgeous.
It kind of communicates in that frame what no other movie that I've seen anyway has ever really communicated, at least not in that way. And I think about so many of the close-ups that this movie presents that really give you that idea of experiencing something for the first time, or at least emphasizing something in ways that you've never really seen before. Where early in the film, when she starts holding the hand, I think, of one of her neighbors, we just go exclusively to the hand, because what is the only thing in that moment that's kind of different than any other moment? It's them holding hands. Or I think about, they utilize the kid that has his burn, the burn on the back of his head. They utilize that a lot in a way that some people might say is exploitative. But as I think about it through the lens of a kid, when you see something like that, there is this like, oh my God, I can't even, that doesn't make sense to me because I've never seen anything like it before. Or when they're walking with a limp on the main street of this small town, and then they see a guy that's walking with a cane and has this extreme limp, and all of a sudden it's just like, maybe should we do this anymore? Because he's going through something that I don't even understand. And I feel like I'm now not allowed to do that. Or seeing the guy having the seizure on their front lawn, and again, all overshare. I have epilepsy, like I've had seizures, and seeing that definitely triggered a certain sense of watching myself do that, because I have seen people have seizures before, but in that moment I'm like looking through the lens of my wife seeing me have a seizure in the bedroom or whatever. And it's just unlike anything that I've really felt before. There have been seizures portrayed on film that I've seen before, but they don't impact me the way that that sequence does, because it is shown through the eyes of a person who's never seen it before. And that's where so much of the power comes from as well.
And I think that's big. It's why the theatrical version, I also feel is so superior, because so many of those scenes are just isolated, and you don't revisit them, and you kind of don't need to. They're almost a mystery, but at the same time, there is such a childlike curiosity to seeing them, and it's also 1950s. And yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I could talk about this movie forever. Again, I'll overshare here and just talk about. I remember again 2 or 3 times ago, it was this experience where I had a newborn baby. I think he might have been 2 months old, and meanwhile, my grandmother was in hospice. And I watched this film, I think, shortly after that, and this idea of seeing the beginning of life and the end of life. It was, as this movie portrays, this incredible tragedy, but also this circular beauty and this idea of, I don't want to call it replacement, but this idea of the beginning and endings of things, and also this idea of when you have such an intense beginning of something, it kind of makes you believe in something beyond the end. Because in the same way that the existence of the universe is miraculous in some way, the existence of a human life is equally as miraculous. We have an intrinsic relationship with the galaxy. I mean, truly, like stardust created everything around us. And so while in the grand scale of things, we are unimportant, we are also so tremendously important in the eyes of the people around us. And the just idea of existence and attempt to find a place in the world is one of incredible complexity, but also through that complexity and through that inability to truly define it definitively, to be redundant, you can find a subjective beauty in everything around you, because Terrence Malick is such a transcendental philosopher, and in a way that was kind of rejected. He came up in a time of logic and trying to define things, but he sort of defied that and said, I'm trying, I don't think I will discover the truth behind these things, but I think contemplating some sort of existence beyond what we can comprehend is an incredibly important thing. And I agree with them. It's a movie of great spirituality and great emotional import, and a way to really, for me, I think I can very often reject the impulses to consider these things and think about the idea of either infinity or some indescribable, unbelievable reality, or something that transcends reality. And this film puts me in a mind space that truly nothing else does, because it doesn't attempt to answer anything. It just wants to try to make you consider something beyond your comprehension. And that's what it's what this does. It's a balm occasionally, and sometimes it's a frightening in some ways at times. And certainly in the imagery in and of itself, you consider experiencing, in the same way that you see somebody having a seizure on the lawn for the first time, you consider going to a carnival and seeing a clown and being like, these are kind of scary to me. And having a crush on a girl for the first time. It is a film that makes me look back on everything that I've experienced and look forward to everything that may be. So again, very, very important. Makes me think hard about a lot of things.
Yeah. I mean,
anyway.
Well, anyway. No, I mean, to go off that point, Jay, I mean, I was really invested in, like how you were saying, we can sort of mirror Jack's experience through your own. And I think I was watching this, and from the moment, obviously we get through the dinosaur sequence and the asteroids, and we get to the main story of this family and what is essentially then the crux of the majority of this film, told from the 40s all the way until the death dream sequence that we'll talk about obviously here in a little bit. I was thinking about, you mentioned those little moments that Jack's seeing things for the first time, and I think it's done through not an accusatory lens, but rather just a curious lens, because of being the first time you've ever seen it. It's non-judgmental. It's just kind of stating like this is something that happens to a person like that. I was thinking about, how when we first meet this family, when we first meet them, it's the way that you describe this film, not, necessarily 100% of the time being painterly, but the image that is the most iconic image of this movie is of Jack's foot in Brad Pitt's hand. And it's the most heavenly photo, right, that you could realize there. And it's
definitely the most painterly. That like 10 minutes absolutely eviscerates me.
Yeah. Because it's the beginning of this family. It's the beginning of their possibilities but also it really is for me watching this experience, as they add members to their family, that's when the divide between the mother and the father, it starts to feel like, because then it is then who is like the tug and pull for these boys, and which way the coin's gonna flip for them. And we are obviously going through the majority of this film through Jack's experience. It would be interesting, maybe, I'm not saying that we need to see those other films, but it would be interesting to go through RL or Stevie's experience, because it might be different, even though they were going through literally the same experiences. We're fixated mostly on Jack's experience. And I forgot about the scene. And I think it's such an impactful notion of looking to where he's going to end up, where his coin is ultimately going to land. And it's the scene where he's a baby. He's about 2 years old, I believe, and he's on the lawn with RL, his brother. And we, obviously understand the impact that this brotherly figure has had on him since his passing, and it's getting them to reflect back on it from these moments early on, and how much the film paints this sort of joyous experience. And that's when he's a child with his mother, and the playing in the house and being with his grandmother and all this stuff. But the defiance and the sort of the attention is then given to the second child, and that's when he he starts lashing out, and he starts becoming a little bit more vocal, and defiant, because it feels as if that attention is not there as much. I found that to be really interesting, especially like when he's on the front lawn with Jessica Chastain, and she's giving them both attention, but when she has to give him her brother just a little bit more attention, is when he starts to lash out. There's that cut that's, and this movie is meticulously cut, but it's that cut where Chastain has to yell at him, no, and then he still does it anyway. And I think about that, because then we see his journey of how reluctantly, but that ultimately he, by the end, establishes that and tells his father, I'm not like her, and reluctantly has to be like, I am like you. And there's that whole sequence in the middle of the film where he goes to the woman's house, and he goes and he's doing things that are not what the other two boys are doing, obviously. And his mom is extremely confused. They're having this sort of tug of war, where the father's essentially gone, and these two are left, and it feels as if history has repeated itself for her, and he doesn't have an outlet to express any of it. His father comes back, and he's back in the same spot that he was, trying to fight back. At least for me, a lot of the future that he sees, but then he's reflected upon the fact that, when he's on the phone with his dad, he's on the phone with him, not his mom, but he's on the phone when Sean Penn's on the phone, and he says, yes, I remember what he means to me. And it's very much how he was when he was a kid to when he is when he's an adult. It doesn't change. And yet when he's on that beach, it's about his connection back to her. And I found it still to be this fascinating wrestling of who you are and who you really feel versus what you could become versus how you're trying to fight who you're trying to be, and how history and time and your family and lineage and tragedy and pain and sorrow. And I do think, Jay, even though not seeing that cut, having his own child in this, that kind of would have been an interesting thing to have, because I felt like they're in the theatrical cut between those scenes with him and his wife, and they feel, I mean, that's the sort of that Malick floatiness and distance that some characters have when they're in relationships and love that we'll see and we'll talk about in the next couple of films. It felt as if, for me, and I don't know what you guys think, it felt like there was a tragedy that happened between the two of them. And it was then bringing up all these experiences back to how his father handled it, how his mother handled it, how then he's handled every single emotional reaction throughout his life. And for me, it was just like, it felt as if a guy was going through it all over again and again, and he still was wrestling on how to grapple with who he really is. That's what I took. Now, knowing that about the extended edition, I mean, it adds probably some different layers to it, but I felt as if they had had a tragedy that sort of separated them, much like it seems like having these children or having this tragedy with his brother separated the O'Briens, the parental O'Briens, even more. So
yeah, I think those scenes with older Jack with Sean Penn are crucial to the movie. I think some people would call them a little disposable, but I think they do a couple of things. One, I think it establishes a sense of continuity, the passage of time. And then two, I think it establishes the world of this movie as a subjective one. And it's not necessarily entirely through the lens of him. There are definitely scenes in this film that he wouldn't have experienced, but when we reach the end of this film and he does reach this level of transcendence and see things through a perspective that he never has experienced before, it is entirely through the eyes of him. And so it brings about this question of, is divinity universal in some way, or is everyone's sense of purpose individualized? And if I reach some sort of transcendence, is my transcendence look the same as Ryan's, or look the same as Erik's, or and it's all about belief in that regard, and trying to define the ability to define oneself is really what defines both their birth and their death. And I think that idea is floating through all of this film. And this idea that Jack is able to confront this idea of death, and then the ways that the people are presented at the beach at the end are his visions of sort of the sublime versions of these people. And they are not how they were when they died. They were how they are in his memory. It's sort of like the peak embodiments of who these people were. And I think one of the secret geniuses, I don't know. One of the best things about this film is, as much as we are confronted with that idea of nature and grace, and his father is presented as being nature and being volcanic to a certain extent and being abusive to a certain extent, when we get some Brad Pitt interior monologue, and he is finally able to understand that my entire life has been driven by the desire to be important. And then also when he does have young Jack, one of I think the greatest lines in the film is when Jack, his dad is kind of like, all I wanted was you guys. You're all I need. Like, I'm realizing that now. And then Jack just says, I'm more like you than her. I think that is like next level impactful, and speaks to this idea that, again, nature, and just the very idea of nature. When you think of Terrence Malick, you think of his films being about nature, but this idea of nature doesn't just involve non-human entities on Earth. Nature involves the natural state of things. And what Terrence Malick argues in this film is that the natural state of things within humanity implies a certain degree of exploitation and jealousy and selfishness that needs to be overcome to reach that level of transcendence. And that, again, is something that I contemplate every time I watch this movie, and just think about that there is a certain level of cynicism to that, and there's a certain level of cynicism to many of Terrence Malick's films, but it's cynicism in service of overcoming the ills that humanity potentially imposes on the world and trying to reach some sort of next level of existence and understanding, and an attempt to transcend our nature and reach that level of grace that implies something beyond what is.
I do find the idea that the Sean Penn sequences are unnecessary to be a little strange, because the story doesn't exist without him as an adult,
right,
since the entire thing is a reflection.
Did you say that, or did?
No.
Some
Jay
some
was,
people
Jay
have
was
said.
mentioning that some people feel that
Okay.
the Sean Penn
All right, I was
sequences aren't needed.
Blah.
Well, they feel discordant, and they're
Yeah, and yes, a little bit more.
I mean, it ties the threads of everything going on.
More context, but I almost really, again, don't need that, because we are getting, this is his retelling in his mind.
Yeah.
Of and that is the version that we need to see and understand, and the perspective that we need to see.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like it's happening. It's such a pivotal point in his life, and
yes,
and
clearly
reflective,
and
and
that's when you are the most reflective, when something very pivotal happens in your life, whether it's a birth or a death or a breakup or something that is really life altering. You go backwards and you look at sometimes even the most minute things, and then realize that a phrase or a moment has had more impact than you've recognized before.
Yeah, I mean, he's at the beginning of this movie, he's looking back on his life the way his father was looking back on his life. We don't necessarily see that, but I think we do kind of get a glimpse of that when he's there at the church and he's praying, and Brad Pitt, that is, and he's lighting lighting the candle and everything. And it's a very, even though he's there and Jack's there watching, it still feels like a singular experience. He's not acknowledging that his son is there. And it almost feels as if he is a ghost in that moment, watching his father in the past struggle through the same sense of disappointment in his life, and disappointment in himself, and how he got to this point. And, you know, the things around, it seems like he lives in a very nice house and has a wife, and in the extended cut has a kid, and it's still very lost by it, and is still traumatized by the death of his brother, and what that did to his mother, and what that did to his father, and what that did to him for the next 20, 30 years of his life. And then what that all means. And then, of course, that then blows up to the, the idea of when this woman loses her child, as if she has just lost the center of her world. And then that's when we get then the expansiveness of looking at the world as a whole, and what that tragedy means in the microscopic moments of the creation of life and the creation of this world. And so I think that that's really beautiful. But then I also go back to his father, and Jay, what you were talking about, where, he has that moment of reckoning later in the film, when he tells Jack, like, you're all that I need. But I love, in the middle of this movie, one of the scenes that just broke me, where he's yelling at at these boys, and he's angry and violent with them at the table for not, listening to him and not bending to his will. And yet then the next scene, if I'm not mistaken, is literally RL playing the guitar while he's sitting at the piano, and they play this musical piece together. And there's this moment, and only Pitt could get, I think, the kind of reaction of, in 1 minute, want to literally rip the heads off of these boys, but then find, I think, the grace in that moment of, they are my sun and my moon as well. God. And I broke thinking about how this man who is always trying to, it seems like, shake hands and make deals and all these different things to improve his station's already improved enough by the existence of these three boys. And I think that's kind of hard for some people to look at, but it's beautiful.
I think the single best moment of acting Brad Pitt has in this movie is when he's criticizing Jack, and then Jack says, "You'd like to kill me." And Brad Pitt's face changing in that moment into the epitome of self-doubt and regret is something that is, ingrained in my mind forever, and makes me reflect on, it's, God, I just keep oversharing this episode, but I didn't grow up with a dad who was flipping tables or anything like that. Or, I love my father dearly. I think he was a good dad, but I think about, this movie makes me think about the fact that every time I talk to my dad on the phone, or every time I talk with my mom on the phone, we always say, "I love you" to each other at the end. And my dad and I never say that to each other. Even though I know it is true, there is this wall there that exists, I think. And there is this expectation, especially of, I think, older, prior generations. And I think that wall is being torn down a little bit, but it again just gives you that sensation of, wow, my relationship with my mom is a lot different than the relationship I have with my dad. And especially, again, in prior generations, you did have this idea, and it was, to a certain extent, it was pretty awesome that a mother could be a mother and one person in the family could work and you could afford a house and, have a normal life. Whereas now it's almost impossible to have a normal life without both parents working. But it just really makes me contemplate the different relationships I have with my mom and my dad, who I both love dearly, and I think we're great parents again. But that inherent, perhaps that is that idea of, perhaps not a literal sense of natural order, but maybe an artificial sense of perceived order that has been planted in specifically America for the last, how old is America? 350 years?
Yeah.
250 years?
Something like that. I mean, like I was the sort of, it's interesting you say that about your parents' dad, or, and your dad, Jay. My dad was kind of grown up through the same kind of mantra through my grandfather, where he's like, I could, my dad tells me I can count on one hand the number of times my father said he loved me. So my dad made that a point to, when we are having those phone calls, to make that course correction, you know what I mean? To have those points of reflection. And I think that, for Jack here, it's like, is he having that moment here where he's looking back on, and even still, like, it's not too late to make those reflections, especially in like the extended cut when he has his own child. Is it not too late to make those changes? When can you make a fundamental foundational change in yourself? Or are you born in that slot? And do the events that you've already experienced, do they just define where you're going to be as a parent, as a spouse, as a human being in the back half of your life? Or, or are you able to then still be able to evolve? And I think that that's still where he's wrestling. That's why I think those Penn scenes are very, important to me, at least, because I still think that he's, as much as he thinks he's made a choice in his adolescence, right? we can make different choices in our adolescence that then evolve and change when we become older and we experience more, not just tragedies, but also things in life that shift us in a positive lens as well. Finding love, having children, having success or not success within your career. But even within all those successes, there's still doubt and there's still fear. And I think that that's where this whole film lies, is him not, trying to find he's still wrestling with who he is ultimately.
Yeah.
And I think
it's also
are
crucial to mention,
wrestling.
and that's the first time Malick has ever had a contemporary setting in any of his movies.
Yeah. I mean,
and then that's all he would do for the next 3. So
for like the next 3 or 4 films. But I think I mean, it's a contemporary setting for a little bit of the film because it's still set in the past. Right. So,
right. But either way, the first time he's ever done that.
Yeah. But it's about, I think, still his contemplation as a person. And by the end, we're all still, even till our last breath on this earth, we're still trying to reconcile. Can we change enough to find peace? Which I think the scenes on the beach are just, I mean, they're just the most beautiful,
best. If you don't feel during that scene, then you're
and I'm like,
robot.
It's also something that I weirdly feel like has been mimicked to death now since this movie came out. I was thinking
they did it well, in my opinion. I wrote this in my review of The Iron Claw. They did it.
Yeah,
they did a really good job in that one.
I think Barry, the television show, did this in the season 3 and 4 a little bit too. Not to the same impactful degree, but it was definitely borrowing from this. But this idea of, like you said, Jay, of just when you are reflecting back, we try to reflect back on people maybe not at their most dark, hopefully, but at their most hopeful or their most youthful or the time when they made an impression on you the most. And so him seeing his mother and father when he was a child, rather than when he sees them as an older statesman or older people, or seeing, like you're saying, like seeing his brother when he was young. I mean, those are when it impacts them the most, or what he chooses to remember instead of the reality of how they left us or how they're going to leave us too. And it's a beautiful way of expressing memory as well, and how we try to remember those that we love and care about the most. Erik, I feel like you haven't talked a lot.
I don't know. I was just listening, but
Erik doesn't like the movie. It's fine.
It didn't know the mention of that cut when Pitt is yelling and then he's like, "Nice dad." I grew up with a terrible father, horrible father, but he would have very much, my memory is very much of those types of moments that felt very jarring, where it would go from abusive to like doing something fun and cool together. And that those are always still parts of the makeup of the memory of any person. And it's interesting to me that I feel like Pitt does get those little bits of being both nature and grace, where Chastain is only grace, and she's burdened, as so many mothers often are, by having to be only grace, and having to have fortitude for your children. And I didn't really think about that until just listening to you guys, because obviously, I would then think about my mother having to do extra and so much more, just in the realm of protection or showing her kids that they were loved when they weren't getting it from their father. And that I don't know. That just is striking me right now in a way that I had not thought about exactly. I don't know.
There's a lot to talk about with this movie, and
There is, and part of what's great is really talking about it. I have no interest in trying to explain it or say this is what it is.
right.
No,
Because
I think if you do,
I think that is a folly to try and do, especially with this.
I think that's the case with
It means
most of
something
his
different to
films.
everyone, and it means something different to everyone each time they watch it.
Yeah, very much so.
Which is
It's
very
kind of a
hard.
miracle of a movie.
It's very hard for movies to do that. You know what I mean?
It is. This honestly is the only one that does that to me. I think. And that's interesting that you say that, Eric, because there actually is a quote. Malick did a seminar at AFI about Jean Renoir and how his whole point was his insert shots of nature elevated all of his films. And then they asked him, why do you think that? And he was like, I don't know. His quote was, I don't know. You get the sense of banal characters stuck in the middle of some world of mystery. It's very difficult to talk about. And that is kind of it.
Not wrong.
His
That's
career
like his
ended up being that. And then
Yeah.
you know who he got in a big fight with about the merit of those natural insert shots? One Paul Schrader. Paul Schrader was like, every one of these, every movie has freaking nature shots. What are you talking about? And then Malick's quote when he said that was, these were different because they undercut all of the human drama, where they take you into somewhere else outside of the film itself and into the world surrounding it, which I agree with. And that's what.
When did Schrader argue with him about this?
This was early 70s, I believe.
Because then it's really funny how he just inserted a bunch of damn images of nature and the earth during First Reformed and kind of just.
Well, maybe he had a change of heart over the years.
I guess so.
He was reformed.
I guess so. Or maybe he watched this movie and understood that that's a stupid opinion. But of course,
I got one fun note on Pitt. So you know that scene where Pitt plays the organ?
Yeah, that's just beautiful.
It is. It's beautiful. But Brad Pitt had a really hard time taking to the organ.
You think?
He was like, you got to do all four limbs. This is absolutely ridiculous. I can't do it. I've only figured out the left hand. So you know what they did?
Such movie star problems.
They cut out the back of his jacket and put another guy's arm through the jacket for the right hand. And he only did the left hand. And another guy did the right hand, like the freaking Swedish chef in the Muppets. Just incredible.
Like one of those like bits where it's like on one of those like sketch comedy shows where you're like your hands are stuck through.
Yeah, exactly. So whose line is it anyway?
Yeah, sketch, like some kind of shit like that. Like
or in Sesame Street where they have a dog and then the dog has hands. And
yeah,
movie magic, ladies and gentlemen.
Whose tree of life is it anyway? You know what I mean? Just put your damn.
There you go. Yeah.
Wow. This is not to go on tangent.
That's a good turn.
Not to go on a tangent, but Jay did bring it up earlier in the show. This is part of one of the great years introductory for an actress, I think, in some time. I think Chastain's 2011 is a phenomenal year.
What else was she in? Give me Take Shelter.
So she had Take Shelter this year.
Yeah.
And she had, was it The Debt?
The Help.
And The Help, which gets her an Oscar
The
nomination.
Help was in the same year?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
And in the same year, she
filmed before all those.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was what essentially broke her through. She had all four of those films.
Oh, this was the year of Chastain. It was huge for her.
It's huge. She eats a poop pie.
No, she doesn't eat the poop pie.
That's
she gives the poop pie.
That's Dallas Bryce Howard.
She plays Howard. She plays. You're right. I'm sorry.
She plays the sort of outcast of the whole group.
She's the nice one.
Yeah. Well, I guess so.
Yeah.
Well, that's Emma Stone too. But yeah. She's I can't believe I'm explaining The Help on Tree of Life, but she essentially takes in Octavia Spencer. Her husband was Dallas Bryce Howard's boyfriend, and he had an affair or started seeing her, and Dallas Bryce Howard ostracized her from all the other ladies and she hires Octavia Spencer without her husband knowing, and they grow a friendship out of all that. Yeah, it's a shocking how much I know about The Help.
If they didn't have character names, she would be called White Savior #2.
She is, what is Miss Celia?
After Emma Stone.
Yeah, Celia is her name in the film.
Yes.
It's, again, shocking how much I know about The Help. Who directed The Help, Eric?
Tate Taylor.
That guy.
Tate Taylor.
Taylor.
Who's actually the director we're covering after this series. No, I'm just kidding. We're
good
not,
because
he's got a weird filmography.
He does. I need an entire episode about Ma. So.
Oh, that's right. He did Ma.
Hell yes, he did.
He also did Ava, which is that other Jessica Chastain film that no one.
Yeah, the one that steals the AwardsWatch font.
Action movie.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I'm looking at the poster right now. That's got Gina Davis, Common, John Malkovich, and Colin Farrell.
It is absolutely terrible.
Joan Chen too. Wow, what a
girl on train.
This guy did Chicken Party, Pretty Ugly People, The Help, Get On Up, The Girl on the Train, Ma, Ava, and Breaking News in Yuba County.
Sounds good. He's killing it. He's crushing it out there.
He's killing it, guys. I don't know what to tell you.
But he did Palm Royale episodes too, so he is redeemed.
And he also did the pilot of Eric's favorite show, Grace and Frankie.
That's a good show.
Knew you were going to say it was a good show.
I'm sorry, Jane Fonda, Lily Tomlin, and yeah, it's a good show.
Isn't Sam Waterston and Martin Sheen their husbands, and then they come out as gay, and then they spend
fucking
Did
great.
Grace and Frankie come out before or after Book Club?
Oh, that's a good question. All right, let me look.
I maintain that Book Club is low key one of the most influential movies of the last 10 years.
Okay, it has its own cinematic universe.
Yeah, Grace and Frankie started in 2015.
Okay, so that was before Book Club.
Book Club started in 2018?
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is dead on too. How do I know all this? God, it's like, when I go back at the shores of my life, I'm going to see random release dates just washed up on the shore for stupid movies.
Book Club is so good.
Did you like Book Club 2?
No, I didn't like 2.
Why didn't you like 2?
Just why you got to make it bigger? Like just do Book Club again. We don't need to go to Europe.
I'd maintain the MVP of those movies is Candice Bergen. I think she's
great. And you know what she was freaking amazing in was Let Them All Talk.
Oh, absolutely.
What a movie that was.
Animation.
Just that I've never seen someone just absolutely like my favorite scene is when like Meryl Streep's like, you want to go have dinner or you want to go grab a cocktail? And she's like, nope. And I've never seen someone like look at Meryl Streep's face and cut her down more in that movie. And it's just for so petty of reasons and everything. Oh, the movie
again. That's like me when you ask when you pitch something. No.
We were rewatching Book Club recently, and I started showing we watch it like regularly.
Is Dave who directed Book Club again?
I have no idea. A robot, I assume. It is so overlit. But
it's so overlit.
I was showing
how would Lubezki and Malick have done with
Oh my
Book
God.
Club?
It would have been great.
Oh my
I was showing my wife pictures of each of the Book Club members when they were young.
Okay.
And we got to Candice Bergen, and she was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
She is one of the most beautiful people I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolute babe.
Bill Holderman was the director of both book clubs.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
He should direct the Devil Wears Prada sequel.
Not Dave Frankel or whatever his name is?
Mm-mm.
Not the Frankelnator? His only two directing jobs are the book club movies.
I think there's a lot of potential there.
When you have a lane, stay in it.
I mean, he also wrote the screenplay for a movie called A Walk in the Woods. Do you guys remember what that is? It's a movie with Robert Redford, Nick Nolte, and Emma Thompson? Yeah, Emma Thompson.
If you say so.
Mary Steenburgen in it too. Nick Offerman.
Hey, there we go. Book club.
There you go.
There we go.
After spending 2 decades
I saw Book Club
in England,
in theaters.
Bill Bryson returns to the U.S. where he decides the best way to connect with his homeland is to hike the Appalachian Trail with one of his oldest friends, Stephen.
I've seen Book Club one more time in a theater than I have seen The Tree of Life, which is once.
What is
I
your
was
wife?
gonna say this is one of those famous tangents, but Jay has brought it full circle now.
Jay, what is the wife?
I'm good at podcasting now. I figured it out finally.
We're back.
Eric, have you seen both book clubs?
Yes, of course I have. I'm gay.
Okay, well that's fair.
And I'm Jay, and I've seen both of them too.
I don't know what that says about Jay, but for me, yes, of course.
Eric, you said you watched this with your husband.
Yes.
In the theater.
Yes.
I know Jay's answer to this. I don't think does Allie like The Tree of Life?
No, she does not like Malick.
Okay. I know my wife walked into the room and said, "Oh, which depressing Malick movie are you watching now?" So I'm curious, did your husband have a reaction to this as much as you did, or was he like, "Get over yourself, we're going to dinner"?
No, he was actually very sympathetic.
Okay.
Well, I mean, no, we had both abusive fathers, so there was an element of that connection. But no, and he loved it.
Okay.
So thank God, because otherwise divorce.
Yeah. Hey, that's how we're going right now. It's been tough.
I didn't want to say it, but I could feel the tension. Yeah.
The funniest one, and we talked about it last episode, was I was watching The New World, and about 20 minutes in, she was like, "Is this from the Tree of Life guy?" I was like,
"Oh wow."
Yeah, I had to balance out.
That's like bordering us on a slur now.
I watched The Tree of Life the same night as I rewatched Pulp Fiction for the first time in like 6-7 years.
Similar energies,
same vibe. It was mostly like, we'll watch a movie together that we hadn't seen in a while, and we just went. I had the 4K. I just got the 4K of Pulp Fiction. So, because I did Jay, you did the 4-hour podcast, right? The rewatchables did.
Oh my God, yeah, that was crazy.
That was rough.
I did not, obviously, but
that
was wild.
No, you listened to it.
I listened to it. Yeah,
you didn't do the show, but
I did not do it.
Yeah, no. Well, you partaked in listening to that 4-hour episode.
Yes, I did. It was crazy.
I only listened to about half, and then I stopped, and I was like, well, I got the 4K coming, so we watched that, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to the other room, and then I watched Tree of Life, and I was alone in a room crying by myself. So, is there anything? Love a
good cry.
Just love a good cry. Eric loves a good cry. I've seen him cry in person. It's a sight to see. Is there anything else you guys? I mean, we could talk about this thing for another couple of hours.
We could.
Is there anything else you guys want to highlight specifically? Yes. Okay. Oh well. Jay, is there anything you would like to highlight? No, I'm just kidding. Eric, yeah, go ahead.
So something I feel goes unrewarded in this movie, and understandably so, is the script itself and the dialogue itself. There is very little of it, and we go quite a long time before we get any dialogue.
Correct.
And again, it is also underlining, bolded, italicized, all caps of what is happening. And even from its source material. I love the bit of dialogue that's from Chastain's Miss Soberan. Help each other, love everyone, every leaf, every ray of light. Thank you. Obviously, a nod to Madonna there, but
that's where God lives.
It's right there. But and that's part of a much longer Dostoevsky quote, which is pretty incredible and outstanding too. It's what the whole thing is about. Love all God's creation, the whole and every grain of sand in it. And that's where the love every leaf, every ray of light is a part of it. And then the very last lines, I give him to you, I give you my son. There is so much in this that is God, religion, spiritual driven. And as also someone like you, Jay, who grew up in a very religious household, I grew up Jehovah's Witness. It was extremely strict. No dinosaurs in those stories. Um, I am I'm very atheist now, and so it's very easy for me to rebuke a lot of religious iconography in a way that, unless it's like not mocking it, but unless it's being really judgmental of it. So when I can watch something or hear something and not feel that that's transcending for me. And I think so much of the dialogue and so much of the script does that. And it's constantly forcing me to be less rigid about my feelings about God and spirituality and religion and all that. And that is my own wall. It's not up to a movie to be able to be stronger than my wall is. But when it does happen, I there's like it's really something special for me.
Yeah, I mean, like, not. I mean, we're all getting personal on this show, I guess. Um, I mean, I grew up. My grandfather was Catholic, and everybody on my father's side was Catholic. My mother's side was Catholic, but we didn't go to church a lot. I didn't go. I went to Catholic school from pre-K to half of kindergarten, and I got essentially like kicked out. Because like they were like, we don't need him. He can go to public school, and which is fine. Uh, but I don't know. I've never. I have such a weird relationship. Even I have not been able to justify like what, because I believe that there's. I would like to believe that there's something out there, but I have no physical proof of that. But I don't behoove anyone that believes in any of that either. It sounds like such a political answer, but it's the truth. It's just like it's actually bigger than any of us, honestly, whether or not there is or there isn't. And I think that like this movie is kind of like weirdly a perfect example of that. It's like you could take it as a very religious, spiritual film, and you can, or you could just believe it to be that of life starts here, life starts there. That's it in the story. And hopefully and there's nothing beyond this. I mean, it sounds sad when you think about it. And trust me, I think about it way too much. Um,
Don't get me wrong. I'm still very judgmental of religious people. Absolutely.
Yes. Erik's the most judgmental person I've ever met. But I don't know. I mean, like for me, I lean towards more just something spiritual or something maybe be bigger than myself, but I don't know what that is. And I don't believe that the organization of a surrounding a religious deity or figure is necessarily the right way of doing it. But, I think just basic things of, just having blind faith in things are a terrible thing. But then I also am like, I don't know how certain things that are so beautiful that are beyond my comprehension can be created if not, without something involved. I don't know. So again, but a movie like this, I don't think it's trying to tell you which way it is about it either. I think it's just kind of trying to help you, or maybe it doesn't help you understand where you are at currently with that answer within yourself. And just saying, well, maybe it's not important. Maybe it's just taking in the beauty itself is just more interesting than trying to figure out how the beauty was created in the first place. And that's kind of where I think I'm a little bit at right now, which I think is totally fine.
I think that is totally fine. I think what we're not giving this movie credit for enough,
thank you, Jack,
or what we haven't talked about is this movie is actually an interesting intersection of religion and science. I think
yeah,
Malick did a very he was very dedicated to showing what was at the time kind of the scientific consensus of a lot of this stuff, while also imbuing it certainly with a lot of religious values, specifically, I think obviously a lot of Christian values. The opening um, quote of the film is from Job, the book of Job. So very clearly he had an angle that he was coming from. But I think he deserves a lot of credit for, I think he is literally portraying evolution in this movie, very explicitly. So that is certainly true. And also this idea of the creation of the universe that is not just this snap of the finger type, Garden of Eden situation. So I think he deserves credit for that. And I just gotta get this off my chest, I guess, which I'll overshare one more time, and this might actually put me over the top. So I think earlier in the podcast, I might have said I watched it 2 times in the last 3 days. I think it's more like 2 times in the last 5 as I think about it. And I watched this movie for the first time this round on, I think, Thursday. And I got a phone call on Saturday morning. My wife was asleep and she didn't answer her phone. And then my mother-in-law called me to inform me that my wife's 18-year-old cousin had died in a motorcycle accident on Friday night. This was a member of my wife's family that we had not seen in probably 6 or 7 years, 5 or 6 years. So I had not seen him since he was 12, 13. And then I do have a certain level of kind of, I come on this podcast, I've been joking, and to an extent, you do kind of play this character, and you have this cognitive dissonance with regard to, doing a show like this and talking about it. But this is certainly a movie that puts me in a different kind of state of mind than a lot of those other things. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, this doesn't give me entirely closure by any stretch, but it puts things in perspective that I don't think, forget about movies, forget about novels or any piece of art, but even just like conversations with people. I have a hard time being able to expose myself in ways that I feel exposed when I watch this movie. And especially when you consider this situation where it was in the same way that in this film, the people are sort of put in their definitive state as 12-ish, 11, 12-year-olds. I hadn't seen this guy since he was 11, 12, 13. And it just really impacted me again in a way that it never had before. And it doesn't necessarily need to be as specifically congruent as it was in this particular situation, but it gives me, or it allows me to think about some sort of transcendent good that can come from an event like that. And again, I wouldn't call myself a specifically religious person. I am a spiritual person because I think the unexplainable is hard to even battle with, especially when you have something like this where you question, why would any sort of greater being put somebody through something like that? And his father now, because of this situation, has declared that every time he talks to someone now, he's going to tell them that he loves them, because he doesn't know if it will ever be the last time that he gets the opportunity to do that. And so you think about that reality, and it's not just because of this tragedy, it allowed him to think of things in a way that exudes appreciation and love in ways that he had never considered before. And it comes from a place of where you entirely could operate as Job does when God decided to test his faith, and look at things through an entirely different lens. And you kind of need to compartmentalize that to a certain extent and try and put yourself in a place of, if not coping, because I feel as if religion can be a way of coping without truly confronting something, but attempting to rationalize something and find some sort of spiritual and or philosophical meaning behind what is going on. And that struck me immensely on this watch, as I'm sure it would have struck everyone. But it is a real asset to me with regard to trying to understand the tragedy in the world around me and trying to confront the existence of tragedy. That's, yeah, I guess that's it. I guess that's all. So anyway, I've cried one time on a podcast before. It was when I talked about the Tree of Life. I've now cried 2 times on a podcast. Both times have now been when I was talking about the Tree of Life. So embarrassing, but good.
It's a good movie. I love it so much. We all love it. I do want to say too, the I think we haven't actually mentioned it, but the score of this movie by Desplat and is incredible.
There's almost no Desplat in it.
Yeah. All this, previously used music and everything in it is wonderful too. I mean, Jay, you were telling me in a group chat that you mow the lawn to the soundtrack.
Well, I did specifically, yesterday.
Yesterday. How did that go during the lawn?
It gave me a great sense of tranquility while I was mowing the lawn.
Did it make you feel one with your grass?
Well, I honestly kind of, I guess.
There
there
was no better way of asking that question, by the way.
The Lacrimosa track in the creation sequence, I think, is an absolute all-timer. There's a bunch of other songs that I could hum, but can't tell you the name of because it's like Beethoven's 7th, a Requiem or whatever, but I couldn't rattle them off to you. But
were you a lot like Pitt at dinner where he's just, where he's conducting right there in front of everybody?
I mean, I do know this soundtrack pretty intimately.
The cycle of symphonic poems 2, My Country, that's probably my favorite piece in it. That's the one from the Czech Philharmonic. Oh my God.
It's just beautiful. It's just beautiful work all around by Mr. Malick. Jay.
Yeah.
Before we get out of here, we got to do one thing.
We got to
do our fun thing, which is we're going to test your award season knowledge based on the film we just reviewed. Instead, we like to call it an honor to get nominated. Now, Eric, this is where you shut up because I know you already know all this. But Jay Ledbetter, I got to ask you.
Yeah.
Tree of Life. Was it nominated for any Oscars?
Oh boy. This is tough after my last soliloquy, but surely this got cinematography.
That's correct.
I'm going to say this got editing because it has to get editing.
Unfortunately, no.
Oh my God. Production design?
Unfortunately, no.
In my mind, am I remembering this getting director?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Okay. I thought I remembered that somewhere in the deep recesses of my brain.
Had to go all the way back into the shores to find that.
Yeah. This would have been 10 nominee picture, right?
Correct.
But I don't think it got picture.
You sure?
I don't think it did.
Well, Jay, you're wrong because it got nominated for
Best
Picture.
Get a picture,
and that's
it. Finally got it right.
Picture, director, cinematography.
That was it.
That was it.
Okay. I mean, it's hard to give a Malick a screenplay. Editing is absolutely absurd, but
yeah, I mean,
5 editors.
How do you give it to anybody? Well, production design is like the hell. How do you not? That's their lifelong battle with Jack Fisk.
Yeah, no shit.
I mean, like, and then Chastain gets nominated for The Help, not this. Pitt's not anywhere near to be found. It's not like they were going to nominate The Boys.
No, but Hunter McCracken is fantastic.
Could this have gotten like
he is good
sound? Visual effects.
Sure, everything. Give it everything.
Yeah, but the visual effects were very intentionally lo-fi, non-CGI. It's one of the, we didn't even really talk about the extended sequence, which
God.
is
the elemental sequence. Like, yeah.
it's so very, yes, very Kubrick, and then now very kind of Oppenheimer, Nolan.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Very, 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 very much so.
I was thinking about that.
Oh, I got a good story about the volcano
way.
sequence, actually.
Oh, you do? You got a volcano story?
There's a good one.
Real quick.
So one, who was an intern on this movie and was involved in the shooting of the volcano sequence? Trey Edward Schultz.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Krisha?
Yeah. Yeah. Waves. Absolutely terrible
God,
film.
what a bad movie.
But so the second unit cinematography at the volcano, they had these big boots on, and as they were filming, the bottoms of their shoes literally melted off. And so they duct taped the soles back on and went out again, because you got to do it for Terry. You got to do it.
Fire of Love.
Yeah.
Exactly. Fire of Love.
Right there.
Better movie than Waves.
Fuck off.
Did you see that? Did you go to Telluride to see that?
Yes, I did.
Oh, well, it's probably one of those festival things for you. You know what I mean? Where it's like it's overhyped. Eric, what do you think of the 2011, 2012 Oscars? Great year, right?
It is a horrible year.
It's a great year of movies, to be fair.
There are some good
great movies.
Yes, because there are good movies every
year. Well, some years, maybe not. But definitely in like 2011, there's some good movies. Some great movies for the decade, obviously, because Tree of Life exists.
I would definitely recommend, though, now that Jay go back and watch the nomination announcement from that morning, because it features a moment that is pretty iconic.
It's pretty fucked up.
And yes, in the realm of nomination announcements. And it's Jennifer Lawrence is doing it with the then Academy president, Tom Sharrock. And I don't know, should I just spoil it?
Just say it.
Spoil it.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. So when they're revealing the director names, and his pronunciation is so incredibly horrible of so many things, and then
Michel
right behind him, Prince comes in and does it correctly. After he does Terrence Malick, he rolls his eyes twice like a fucking slot machine.
What an asshole.
Oh, I wanted to punch him so hard.
Clearly.
Sounds like a total Dorcas.
He was a douche.
Jay, would you like me to tell you who was nominated alongside Terrence Malick for the Tree of Life?
I would love to.
All right. So the winner was
Michelle. But again, you got to watch the nomination.
All right. I'll go watch it.
Audience,
the reveal of the nominees for Best Picture, a choice.
The last, what is it? It's Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close is like the last one, right, Eric?
Yes, but because it's all done out of, now see, we're just spoiling it for Jay. It's all done out of alphabetical order, but Lawrence, in her infinite brilliance, does this and pause, and then Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. Horrible movie, as we all know. But the audience,
the waves of 2011,
which is fuck you, which is mostly press and then publicists, for films and studios.
Yeah, those people were amped for that.
They were very into Extremely Loud getting in.
That's Max von Sydow's own. Is that Max? No, that's not his only Oscar nom, but it's one of his. So director was Michel Hazanavicius, who won for The Artist. Your favorite film of all time, Jay. Actually,
everyone's.
Yeah. Alexander Payne for The Descendants.
One of his worst movies.
Martin Scorsese for Hugo.
Fine.
Hugo. All right.
If you're Tom Sharrock, it's Hugo.
And then Eric's favorite, Woody Allen for Midnight in Paris.
Deserved nomination, great film.
Oh,
great. Yeah, really good movie, actually, to be fair.
I don't, yeah, I think that movie's okay.
Jay. I mean, obviously Malick should have won this. This is kind of, can we just say it?
But also, I mean, how
the artist is a fucking stupid win. I'm just gonna say,
man, did it own the Oscars?
Man, it did. Like, Eric, you were. I mean, I wasn't as online or in the forums as you were back then, but like, this is literally the definition of, and I think where a lot of us have gotten the fact that like Hollywood just loves their fucking selves, and it's like a silent era movie, and like they just fell head over heels for that stupid little dog and everything in this movie, when like this is one of the worst films in the lineup, let alone the winner. It's bad. That movie sucks.
Yeah, but I think that thought is really overstated, that Hollywood loves itself, so it rewards itself. It does not really do that very much.
No, but it didn't. No, what I was saying was that
everything about the artist was completely off brand for them. No, totally the opposite.
No, it fed into that, was what I'm saying.
I disagree.
No, I feel like, everyone would point out to you or to me, oh, well, they don't, and you're like, oh, well, they don't win anything. And then this fucking stupid shit comes along. And then, and it's like, it's
not
the
sure
most,
what you're saying though.
It's the basicest pick that you could have made in this lineup. And it proves that, like, yeah, maybe they do like themselves, and it's the easiest pick. And it's like, if you feed them, if you feed it just fondant of the past and nostalgia berries, like that's what this movie is. And it doesn't make any sense why a movie like this caught on the way it does. Even still nowadays, it doesn't make any sense.
I think that's a mischaracterization, because there's the only people that would be having nostalgia for this.
Wow.
Would be dying at this point.
Well, they still have a
vote. There was a factor to it that was multiple factors that were completely unique. The largely silent element of it, the black and white, that was extremely unusual for anything that the Academy was remotely
interested in
about.
Yeah.
So it had an appeal that was unlike anything else that they had done. And they do that all the time, where they will, people love to say this is an Oscar bait movie, and this is the type of thing that they reward if something happens like 2 or 3 times. But the other thing that the Academy loves to do is to do the opposite of what people think that it's going to do. And this was an example of that. This doesn't have anything to do with how I feel about the movie, but it was not representative of.
Yeah, that's the thing.
What they were doing.
There are those great shots in Houston of the trees growing out of the concrete in the urban environment that are very reminiscent of the tree growing in the yard of their house. And it's very much like trying to overcome this environment to create something similar to the tree of life in the yard. Also, the artist's not that good.
Got it.
What do you think of the film, though, Eric?
Of the artist?
Yeah,
it's fine.
When you putting on a lot?
No, I've seen it twice.
I've seen it once, and I just didn't get it then, and I'll never get it now.
It's not awful by any stretch.
No,
I didn't have a good time with it. I mean, I think
whatever. We'll do it when we'll cover it on what's his name's podcast series. Yeah.
I mean, I think Hugo's a better movie. I think Midnight in Paris is a better movie. I think this movie that we talked about today is a better movie. I think Moneyball is a better movie.
Yeah.
I don't understand how Moneyball didn't get director nom. I mean, like The Help and War Horse and Extremely Loud and Incredibly
War
Close.
Horse.
What are we doing?
Rocks,
do you like War Horse?
I love War Horse.
Really?
Yes, sir.
I gotta rewind. Some of those other Spielbergs, I gotta go back and watch them. Would you? I mean, who won cinematography? Who won that?
Probably the artist.
That was Robbie Richardson for Hugo.
Yeah.
Oh, for Hugo.
That's right.
It was the artist, the girl with the dragon tattoo.
Great movie.
Great
well
movie.
Shot film.
Yeah. David Fincher, good at his job. The Tree of Life and Warhorse. Those were the other nominees.
Warhorse, good looking movie. A lot of Spielbergian magic in that one.
Well, and remember, Tree of Life won the Palme d'Or that year, and
Yes,
the artist was also in competition with it that year, and Jean Dujardin won there and then won the Oscar.
Can't believe the French were actually ahead of the curve there. I'm just saying,
well,
you know what?
French actor.
I know they give him actor, but then they were like, for picture though, let's just go with this one. Which was
as they should have.
Which and to be fair, until Honora won this year the Palme, this was the last time an American filmmaker won the Palme at Cannes.
Well, outside of Fahrenheit, the narrative.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, but I'm talking about like since Tree of Life won to Honora, no other American filmmaker won the Palme d'Or because Fahrenheit's way before this, like a decade before this, Eric. That's what I'm saying.
Do you want to know who was the president and the jury that made that choice?
For the Tree of Life?
Yes.
Oh, God. I feel like
or do you remember?
I feel like I remember this. Well, I always remember because Eric brought this up on an old podcast that he did with me and Jay many years ago when we talked about Mulholland Drive, that Steven Spielberg gave the Palme to Blue is the Warmest Color.
Hell yeah.
Hashtag 4K titties.
Was it Adrian Grenier?
The true villain of Devil Wears Prada, you mean?
I hope they don't bring him back.
Simon Baker's too. Bad villain in that movie. No, who was it, Eric?
So it was Robert De Niro, Jude Law, Uma Thurman, Olivia Sayas. It's a funny little thing because almost every
De Niro was the head of the jury.
Yeah, almost every Cannes jury and every decision is fraught with
controversy.
Yes, like
little snippiness back and forth.
Like here's a group that wanted to give it to this film, and here's a group that wanted to give it to this, and then how much pressure the president of the Cannes jury puts on the other members. So at the time, they being some wanted to give Melancholia the Palme.
Yeah, until that press conference.
But did not want to give it to Lars von Trier. So he basically sunk his own chances at winning the Palme that year.
You mean when he opened his mouth?
Would have happened.
Because it's one of the most notoriously destructive press conferences for a movie you could see.
Remember when Joker won the Golden Lion? That was crazy.
Yeah, I can't wait for the sequel to win.
Folie
No, it's gonna be Beetlejuice. What are you talking about? Keaton's supposed to win supporting actor. Let's go. Well, then anyway, wasn't a separation there too? Eric, was a separation at Cannes
in 2011?
Because it's the same year.
Let me see.
I kind of feel like it was.
It was The Artist's Drive.
Oh,
yeah, like Melancholia, Once Upon a Time in Anatolia. No,
it went to Berlin.
We need to talk about Kevin. This must be the place. Oh,
which one's this? Must be the place.
That's the Sean Penn.
Oh, is it the one where he's like
Robert Smith drag?
That's right.
Fucking horrible movie.
He talked about we need to talk about Kevin on the
That's
one
a good
series. We don't like that movie. No,
that's a good movie.
Her worst by far.
Damn. Wow.
Bad movie. We need to talk about Kevin. Probably never again on this show. Yeah, they gave it to the right film. But then there's like, this is like the year where like, this is the year of shame, right? And Shame didn't get in. Fassbender didn't get in. Mulligan didn't get in. They were big on the
too many people afraid of that big swinging dick.
Yeah. Well, it's like when Clooney won the Globe and he talked about like he could take it out on the golf course, right? And like shooting, like, right? And you're like,
Shame and the Tree of Life, great double feature.
I think so. Jay, thoughts on the Iron Lady?
No opinion. Haven't seen it.
Haven't seen it? Good for you. Erik, is that one of the worst actress winners in your lifetime?
Is that a Marvel movie?
Yes, it's a Marvel movie. Good job, Jay. Never mind. I don't need your thoughts on it anymore.
Nope.
That's kind of perfect as it is.
Nothing to offer.
Would you guys, I assume you guys would give the Tree of Life Best Picture here, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll give it the Nobel Prize.
Yeah, that's pretty undisputed, I believe.
Can you give a movie a Nobel Prize?
You cannot.
If you believe hard enough.
Oh,
wow.
If you just believe. This should be in the Library of Congress. That's what this should be in.
Should be in the Library of God.
Yeah.
Whoa. Now.
That's a little too religious.
Separation.
Yeah. Should be in the Jedi Temple.
A separation. There you go. All right. It's a good ep. It's when we start coming off the rails at the end here.
Erik, can you do this thing justice?
Erik, can you tell everybody where they can find you and all your quote unquote work on the internet?
You can find me crying in a movie theater if that movie is about fathers and sons.
No shit.
You can also find me at awardswatch.com and sign up for our newsletter, which comes out twice a week if I'm feeling frisky.
Do you have a recommendation for a movie that people should watch? Erik, we usually do a recommendation for the week. Doesn't have to be something new. It can be something old that you watched recently that people should catch up on.
Oh my God. Well, we're doing I guess at the point of this release of this, we will have already had our 1999 retrospective out. So watching a lot of that at the time of this recording. But I don't know, see something small. See Sing Sing or Dee Dee or something that you might have to drive an hour away to go see.
Despicable Me 4.
Wow.
Yeah, there you go.
In a way, Despicable Me is about fathers and sons if you consider the Minions his children.
Motherfucker. Well, he has literal children.
Yeah, but they're daughters.
He does, which
way to undermine fathers and daughters, Jay. Jesus.
Wow, that was what Erik did.
That was a little rude, Well, I've seen Erik cry at a father-daughter movie. I was there the day he saw After Sun, and he couldn't move out of his seat. It was like watching Tom York perform on stage. I
was almost ready to be as a father of a daughter.
Yeah, I've seen you cry father-son movies, father-daughter movies, regular movies, All of Us Strangers. I was there for that. That was a lot.
That's a father-son, mother-son movie.
That's true.
All of those things put together.
Watch Tuesday. That was the mother-daughter movie.
I don't think I cried, but it's fucking great.
No, you did. You did. I saw you.
Did I?
Yeah, you did.
With the beach scene?
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't remember that.
I did. You and I were both.
I think you might have been drunk. It was 1 in the afternoon.
Maybe it was the altitude that day. Yeah. Jay?
Yeah.
Where can we find you? Recommendation, buddy.
Yeah. Find me on Letterboxd, J Ledbetter, Twitter at Mr. J Ledbetter. Any writing I'm doing, AwardsWatch, recommendation, The Tree of Life. Go watch that. I will not recommend anything else on this episode.
Really?
God, I hope I did this movie justice. This was a very important episode. So good night.
All right. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd at Ryan McQuade77. You can find all my work at awardswatch.com. If you like podcasts, we do the main show every Monday and sometimes on Wednesdays during award season. 5 stars on iTunes and Spotify. I greatly appreciate those. While you're over the website, sign up for the newsletter. Erik puts that together a couple times a week. It's the best place to get all of our news, reviews, interviews, and podcasts sent to you all in one place. And movie recommendation of the week. I'll do a double promotion here, I guess. The time of this recording, we're just coming off the weekend.
Yeah, you can have
box
mine.
office. Cool, because I'm gonna do it anyway.
Yep.
I saw this new movie. It's by this little known director. Some call the Terrence Malick of his generation. His name's M. Night Shyamalan. He made a nature movie. It's called The Happening. Spiritual successor. It was The Tree of Life. Anyway, I watched Trap. I think Trap rules. We're in Trap summer.
I think it's pretty
Freaking
fun.
great. It's a lot of fun. M. Night's making
God, is it dumb?
I like. Hey, it's dumb. It's fun. Hartnett's pretty incredible in it.
He's really good.
Not all pie is good pie. And yeah, go and watch it. It's a great trip. Watch it in a dark room filled with strangers, and it'll make you really scared of those strangers you're watching it in the dark room with. And Lady Raven, some of those songs, good bops. I liked them. I wish Midsize Sedan was in the film though. That would have been like taking it to the next level. Though there is a cameo in that movie that is pretty hilarious.
You should have opened for it.
Yeah, he should. Well, he's dead.
So what?
Unless this is set in the past, but I doubt that it is. It's all set within his universe. Anyway, and then when you're done, if you've already seen Trap or see it again, go to the website. I wrote way too many words on the filmography of M. Night Shyamalan. Did a breaking piece. Erik said it was really good and that he was proud of me when I turned it in. Yeah, I was like, wow. Okay, I didn't ask for any of that, but
acting performance of a lifetime.
Exactly, right there. Thank you all. We will be back next week talking about To the Wonder. Some say this is it's a movie, and we'll
what
talk
if Ben
about
Affleck had a bad marriage?
Imagine it's a little stranger than fiction, I guess. We'll see you all next week. Thank you all so much for listening. Bye-bye.